When I was a boy growing up in Lafayette in the 40s, I wore a towel. I remember a red towel pinned around my neck. And I would stand on a fence and I would attempt to fly and I would shout, Shazam! And of course nothing happened, and once I broke a leg. But it's this man, my guest today's fault. His name is Marc Swayze, and he is the brilliant comedic cartoonist and artist who helped create Captain Marvel. Good to be with you, Marc. Marc, that Billy Batson in Lafayette, he held us captivated. And we just love that Shazam. That became a word in the American lexicon. Shazam. Wonder where y'all got that word.
That came from the writer Bill Parker, who was very likely the original creator of Captain Marvel and Billy Batson and the whole idea. And it can be traced back to certain figures in Greek mythology or wherever.
I remember Z stood for Zeus.
Yeah, and M is for the million things you gave me, and so on.
Of course, Greek mythology. We're with Marc Swayze at his home in Monroe, Louisiana. And before I talk to Marc, I've got to tell you, I've met some unique families, but the Swayzes are the most unique. Now listen to this just one moment. Marc's wife, a charming lady, is a painter. A daughter is a professional singer, a coloratura, who will do a tour in Italy this summer. And a granddaughter is a poetess who is going to enter LSU's creative writing department. And she's been published. But everyone in the family is a creative entity into himself or herself. How did all that talent, how do you account for it?
Well, that's a difficult question. My own parents, I always thought could do anything in the world. Certainly my mother played nice piano and organ, and my father taught himself to play the violin so that they could play together. And my father was a steamboat captain, designer, builder, and pilot. It takes talent for that, I'm sure, and I'm proud of those folks. And we've been blessed with talent, I think, all along the way.
Quite remarkable, really, and in truth, I've never run into a family like this before. Marc, how did you begin drawing? When did you begin?
I think the children must draw the things that they're interested in. When they're young, my first interest, as I recall, was horses, and Mama saved sketches around there that horses that I drew that didn't even look like horses. And then later on, somebody read me the story of Tarzan of the Apes, and I became interested in drawing apes then, and I was captivated by that. I think that the Edgar Rice Burroughs influence may have stayed with me for a while. And one thing led to another. When I started playing ball, I loved to play baseball, and did. I drew baseball players and football players and sports and so on.
And you were a musician?
Well, yes.
Self-taught?
Yeah, I majored in music when I was at the Northeast Center of LSU. That was a 2-year school here, and got to playing in bands at that time. And I played in a number of bands, local territory bands, you know, and I've enjoyed a side career in music.
Now, how did the professional cartooning? You're in Monroe, Louisiana, for goodness sakes. I don't know of any comic books that are published in Monroe. How did that begin?
Well, I graduated. I've been an art student at Louisiana Tech, And I got my BA at Louisiana Tech, but I can't blame it all on Louisiana Tech. I got my master's from NLU, and I had studied music at Northeast Center of LSU. So I guess it's a conglomeration of education there, or attempts at it anyway.
And then, how did the comic strip business? How did you get into that?
The director of the music department at Tech called me. After my graduation, I went back to my old job delivering milk from my uncle's dairy. And after a couple of months of it, I got a call from Miss Elizabeth Bethay, who was the head of the art department at Tech. And she said that a member of the art department faculty, Miss Louise Smith, had a cousin who drew a comic strip and needed an assistant, and they thought of me and wondered if they could connect him to give him my name. And so his name was Russell Keaton, and his home was in Corinth, Mississippi, and his feature was with the Chicago syndicate. I forget the name of the syndicate. But we corresponded, and he said send samples, and the last one, I think, of correspondence was come in for an interview, but be prepared to stay.
Wow.
And I stayed.
Mississippi?
Corinth, Mississippi.
Corinth, Mississippi.
Our neighboring state.
But that didn't look near as good as Monroe, huh?
Nothing did.
No, you're a real Monroe man.
Right.
Well, so all right, you worked with him on this strip. What was the name of the strip? Do you remember?
Flying Jenny. Oh, yes,
Flying
indeed.
Jenny, of course.
I do remember, and I was with him about a year and a half.
And what came next?
Well, Fawcett Publications in New York.
Big.
Pardon?
They're big.
Big.
Yeah.
I was very impressed when I showed up there. They had sent me some drawings or reproductions of a red suited character that I wasn't familiar with, but, and to see if I could copy it, you know. And I wanted to make New York because I thought that's where the career for an illustrator would be. And as a matter of fact, Keaton had stressed that. He said, you belong in New York or Chicago. His expression was, in the swim of things. I kind of like that.
It's an old-time expression.
Yeah,
I love it too, in the swim of things.
And
I never was, but I love the expression. Go ahead.
Russell Keaton was a wonderful man. Was a wonderful friend and a lifelong friend. So I sent these drawings in, and they said almost the same thing. We will offer you this job, so and so and so. If you can make it Friday, fine. We're closed Saturday, but if not Friday, make it Monday if you're interested. So Monday morning, I was in their reception room, and I was bowled over at the Hollywood layout there, and here was this receptionist. Looked like she was should have been cast as a leading lady in a Hollywood movie. I fell in love with her. I sat there, you know, until she stood up, and she was about 1.5 feet taller than I was, and that killed that. But it was an impression, and they occupied the 22nd and the 23rd and part of the 24th floors of the Paramount building right at Times Square. And that was impressive to me, too, a country boy.
Country boy in Times Square.
That's right.
Not bad.
That's it.
And you began to?
Well, that was my job, was drawing Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
At that time, and I met the man who had originated Captain Marvel about a year before. The writer, Bill Parker, had gone either directly into the military or National Guard training, but he wasn't there at the time. But the first artist was a gentleman named C.C. Beck, and Beck and I became great friends in the 2 years that I was there before military.
Let me ask you this. Was that then the golden age of comic books?
Well,
or did it come a little later?
The golden age of comics has been identified with as different periods. As far as I'm concerned, the golden age was during the development period of the great superheroes.
Batman?
Batman came
Superman?
after. Superman was first, and Captain Marvel, I think, was probably second, and Batman and Robin and the rest of them came along that time. And I like to think of that. My career in comics lasted about 15 years, and I like to think of that as the golden age of comics. Now, others have placed it at a longer span than that. But it certainly was the formative years of Captain Marvel, who had begun in 40. I was there in 41 and 42 before I went into the military. And during that period, and I'm not saying that's because I was there or working on it, but Captain Marvel actually zoomed from doing pretty good to be the top seller of all the comics. They were putting out within a few years, two issues of Captain Marvel books a month, where all the others were happy to issue and do well with one issue a month.
Were y'all well paid? That's back in the 40s now.
Well, looking back, I lived in Manhattan, single and in tight quarters, small quarters and all that, but I didn't complain about the money. I've read some of the early artists like that saying that, well, Beck, for example, referred back to the miserable days. They weren't miserable to me. I mean, if I had been married, probably with a family, I probably would do the same thing, but it was beautiful to me.
What did the military do with an illustrator? You went into the service.
Military?
Yeah.
When I went in, I had registered at Memphis, Tennessee when I was with Keaton on Flying Jenny, and I was sent I stayed with that draft board and was sent to a reception center at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. As the military would do, they would have the reception center for the state of Tennessee and another state. But we were new at wars at that time, and
That's a great line. We were new at wars.
Well, they held me there for a while to illustrate some posters promoting the sale of Army insurance and war bonds to the servicemen. And they came in while I was doing that, and fixed me up a pretty good studio and got the equipment and all, and I was living pretty well for a recruit. And they came in at one point and asked me what my background was in personnel work, and I said absolutely none. And the next day they came in again, and this was the head of the classifications and assignments division, which was a part of the Adjutant General's department. And he said, you haven't had any, well, in the meantime, let me back up a little bit.
All right.
In the meantime, a sergeant came in who happened to be, I knew because I had heard him over in one of the halls practicing, happened to play neat jazz piano. Now, I had gotten into music back playing in the bands in Monroe and in Louisiana and Mississippi territories, even when I was in college. And I like this. And he said, listen, they have just shipped out our big band. We've got about 4 fellows here. We're going to try to form a small combo. And he said, come over and rehearse with us. Well, I did a time or two, and then when I went back to this little studio they'd rigged up, well, these people were in there again. This Captain something or other said, you haven't had any experience in personnel work at all? He said, look, he said, we can't assign an artist in our unit, but we can assign somebody in
personnel
interviewing classifications. Yeah. And I was thinking of this little jazz combo then, and I said, well, come to think of it, Captain, I've always had a deep interest in personnel work. And
so
I I was assigned to headquarters company on that basis, and that was
That's not bad duty.
my contribution to the
the
war
war
effort.
So you get out the Army. What do you do next?
Go back to New York. Well, I came to see my father and my sisters here in Monroe first, and then went right straight to New York and to Fawcett Publications again, and began to dicker with them because I didn't want to stay in New York. I told them, I said, my aim now is to go back to Monroe, back to my home. Well, the executive editor, was a man named Ralph Day, said, what do you want? What kind of career could you have back in Monroe? There's no publishing companies back there. And I said, well, it'd be nice to stay in it, but I said, I'll get into something else. I said, there's a lot of work on that. I said, I'm a good truck driver. I can drive a truck, dump truck at that. And he said, well, we're going to have a meeting about this because we've never dealt with anybody out of town like that. He said, exactly what are you asking for? I said, I want a permanent, regular assignment that I can ship in here on a regular basis.
Mail to you.
And be, so that the income will be dependable, because I want to go back south and I want to get married and have a family like the men of my family have done. And he said, well, in the long run, he said, we've had a meeting about this. And as I say, we've never done this before, deal with somebody out of town like this. All of our freelance people are people who can come in and to the offices and go back out. But he said, and I was real pleased and flattered at this, he said, we've talked about you in the staff here, and Mr. Alley, the art director, says you can certainly be depended upon for in respect to deadlines, and he said, go in there and tell the comics editor to give you whatever it takes to make you happy.
My goodness. That's some story.
Yeah, I was really flattered. I went in and told I took two features. One was called The Phantom Eagle in Wow Comics, and the other was Prince Ibis the Magician, I think was in Master Comics. Oh, wow, I forget which. I took the two features. And in leaving, I went across in the same community there at Times Square to visit the Bell Syndicate people, whom I had known since the days with Russell Keaton. And Miss Kathleen Caesar was the comics editor, and she said, we had heard you were out of the service and been looking for you because we want to talk to you. Russell Keaton, that was the creator, is going into military flight training, and we've had Gladys Parker, who had done Mopsy, a little one-panel feature. She did a magnificent job on Mopsy, had been doing the Flying Jenny Sunday page. Now, Mopsy, Parker was great on Mopsy, but to be perfectly frank, and she wouldn't mind my saying this, was not a comic strip artist. But Russell, we would like for you to take the Sunday page, and Russell can, in his training, can continue to do the daily strip. And I didn't want to do this. I already had these two things, which was a load from Fawcett. But they said they made it attractive. One was the byline on it. They gave me a byline on it. Well, I needed that because I was unknown and still am, but that's all right. So then I went back and gave Ibis the Magician back to Will Lieberson, the comics editor, and said, I'm sorry, I'm going to make a deal with Bell to take that Sunday page back with the Phantom Eagle. So I'm doing Phantom Eagle for Wow Comics and the Sunday page of Flying Jenny for Bell Syndicate.
And all from here in Monroe, Louisiana.
That's when I came back, and I had won my point there. He said, why do you want to go back? I said, that's my homeland, that's my South.
Did people in Monroe have any idea what you were doing?
Oh, no. I've never sought any attention in Monroe. There was a news article or two or something like that, but I didn't figure people cared. I mean,
what do you think of comic book art today? It's totally different, isn't it?
It's totally different. I don't know much about it because I've never read the comics except my own stuff.
Yes. It's very realistic, and a lot of it is devoted to horrifying, like virtually everything else in our society.
C.C. Beck, and he was the fellow who had begun to draw Captain Marvel with Parker in the very beginning. And Beck and I were great friends and talked a heck of a lot about these things. But in his later years, he became editor of a fanzine, they call him, FCA, Fawcett Collectors of America. And in some of his writing, he got into that subject of what they are today. And his criticism was chiefly that there's too much. I mean, his theory, and all of our theory, we were storytellers, was timing. If you go along with your story quietly and building up like this, so that if there's suddenly some excitement and impact, it's different. But if you start the story off with wide open mouths and running feet into the thing like that, as he said, and I agree 100%, then there's no emphasis when you need emphasis.
Today, though, comic strips have to compete with video games, television, the internet. There are so many outlets now for these fantasy stories that I wonder if comic strips are enjoying a good time now. I'd rather doubt it.
I couldn't answer it. I don't know. There have been ups and downs just from what I could read in the news, you know. But
what do you do now in your spare time? What do you do for relaxation?
Me? Well, I play a little guitar every morning, a little piano. And,
do you really?
Yeah. I draw every morning. I do some drawing.
You still draw?
Yes. I'm better. I can draw better today than I ever could because observation. You begin to learn. You know. Not begin to learn, but you continue to learn, and I guess that's the fun of it.
Has that been a satisfying career, this illustrating and these comic strips and so on? Has that been a personally satisfying? I just wonder.
Man, that's a good question, and I take pleasure in answering it. It is tremendously satisfying. I can't say that. In respect to comics alone, because I guess it's up to the individual. I never had a job that I didn't like, even delivering milk and driving cattle. Those were joys to me. And
when you delivered milk, I saw one of your comic book drawings. It was a horse-drawn wagon, wasn't it?
Yes, my uncle, boy, he had some good ideas, and he said, D, that was my nickname in those days. I've got an idea here. I would like to restore the image of the milk delivery wagon. He said, and I'm having this one. He said, I'm having this one specially built with rubber tires instead of the old wagon. But I want to hitch a nice horse to it and have her shod with steel shoes instead of the rubber shoes that the saddle horses frequently use, I understand today. So that there'll be the old familiar clop,
clop.
And thinking of house-to-house delivery like in the old days. Pretty good marketing idea. I mean, and he was a good businessman too. And he said, now that you're out of school, what do you think of your taking that route? And I said, well, I kind of had my heart set on driving cattle again. I love to ride horseback riding, but and grew up.
You were kind of an adventurer, is the truth of it.
What?
You were a kind of an adventurer. You like to try many things and different things.
Well, you say many things, but over the period of time that I've been blessed with, really. Let me say that. It doesn't come out to many. I mean, just a few things. A lot of interest, yes, and I'm thankful for those.
Did you enjoy reading?
When I was a youngster, my father used to read adventure stories to me.
There you are.
And he probably read the original Tarzan of the Apes to me. If I don't know, I may have been old enough to read myself. And then, of course, you continue that. When I was a kid, my brother was 10 years older than I, and he subscribed to Boy's Life and American Boy. You remember those?
Yes, sir.
I read those when they came in, but I guess in those days I read a lot. Now, after I got into using to drawing all the time, my reading diminished because you rasterize.
Well, Marc, I want to tell you what a pleasure it is, you allowing us to come into your home here in Monroe and share your memories with us. You're a fascinating man, and I must repeat again, with one of the more unusual, fascinating families that I've ever met. And they're all making contributions to this beloved state, Louisiana. And I want to shake hands with you, and I want to thank you, sir.
Thank you for those nice words, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Louisiana Legends is made possible by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana. This important program series enables us to discover, through the accomplishments of our fellow Louisianians, the unique character of a state so proudly served by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana for 65 years.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or send $19.95 to Louisiana Legends, care of LPB, 7733 Perkins Road, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Please allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery.